10 things you didn't know about D.B. Cooper. Several years on and we still don't know the identity of D.B. Cooper. On November 24, 1971, the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, a well-dressed, middle-aged man purchased a one-way ticket from Portland, Oregon to Seattle, Washington. He paid for the ticket with a $20 bill and gave his name as Cooper, Dan Cooper. Once he and the 36 other passengers boarded, Cooper sat in seat 18E, sipped a bourbon and 7, smoked some Raleigh cigarettes, and passed the flight attendant a note stating that he had a bomb. He proceeded to show her something in his attaché case that certainly resembled a bomb. Cooper eventually ended up with $200,000 in cash from the police. After requesting the crew to take off again, he proceeded to jump out of the plane and into the night, and he was never seen again. In the video, we unravel 10 things you probably didn't know about D.B. Cooper. But before we get it rolling, kindly be sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification button so that you'll be able to get updates whenever we upload any new content. And now, let's go. Number 10. He was never found nor identified. The most mysterious fact surrounding the hijacking in November of 1971 is that the FBI never identified the man famed as D.B. Cooper. It remains one of the very few unsolved air piracy crimes involving a commercial airliner. The man described by witnesses jumped out of the plane after the second takeoff and was never seen again. Multiple theories exist as to his identity. Some theories suggest that the infamous hijacker Richard Floyd McCoy Jr. was the culprit. In 1972, McCoy hijacked a commercial airliner and demanded a $500,000 ransom. He then proceeded to jump out of the plane, much like D.B. Cooper did. McCoy was caught and later killed after escaping prison. He was never definitely proven to be Cooper, and the FBI had doubts about him. Other culprits include Kenneth Christensen, whose brother identified him as Cooper and who also bore a strong resemblance to the FBI drawing, and a man identified as Jack Kofelt. Although many suspects have existed, none of them have ever proven beyond a reasonable doubt to be Cooper. And in 2016, the FBI publicly announced that they were suspending the investigation. Number 9. Some of the money he stole was recovered years later. In February of 1980, an 8-year-old boy who was on vacation near Vancouver, Washington, uncovered some of the bills while raking through a sandy riverbank. They were still bundled as they had been when they were provided to Cooper in 1971. Although they had degraded over the years, FBI technicians confirmed they were in fact a portion of Cooper's money. The location of the discovery was about 14 kilometers from the theoretical landing position of Cooper. Noticeably, one of the 3 100 bill stacks only contained 90 bills, which only raises more questions. How did the bills get to the riverbank? Had they been there for years, or had they recently washed ashore? Were they deliberately buried by Cooper or an accomplice? None of the other bills have ever been reported in circulation and remain missing to this day. However, in what is a feel-good element to this story, the boy was allowed to keep roughly half of the money he found that day and sold it at an auction in 2008 for over $37,000. Number 8. He led to changes in aviation security. After the Cooper hijackings, aviation authorities and the FBI realized that the relaxed security on American domestic flights was too easy for hijackers. The first step to preventing hijacking was to introduce full baggage security checks for the first time. This might seem unbelievable in 2022, but the issue had to actually be passed to the U.S. courts in 1973. American passengers thought these searches were a violation of their rights, but eventually it was deemed necessary to protect those on board. It also became mandatory for all cockpit doors to have a peephole so that the pilots could be aware of what was happening on the other side. Aviation authorities also created what is known as the Cooper vane, a device which prevents the aft stairs from being opened during flight. This would essentially make disembarking from a plane mid-flight in the manner Cooper did impossible, and before long, hijackings began to become less frequent. Number 7. There are chances he died while escaping. Imagine jumping out of a moving airplane in the middle of the night with over 9 kilograms of money strapped to you into the cold November weather. This is what the hijacker did. Cooper reportedly jumped out of the back of the plane over the dense forest near Mount St. Helens in Washington state. Cooper would have been landing in an unknown area and would have likely suffered ankle or leg injuries. According to the FBI investigation files, master parachute rigger Earl J. Cossey stated that Cooper would have been completely unable to control his rate of descent, even though most assume he didn't survive the landing. No parachute debris or remains of Cooper were ever discovered in the wide search zone. Lakes and rivers were swept to no avail. Another curious fact that despite a total of 5 planes tailing the Boeing 727, none of the pilots could say they witnessed Cooper jumping from the plane. Number 6. There were several taunting letters allegedly from him. At least 6 letters claiming to be from the hijacker and often taunting authorities were mailed to newspapers across the U.S. in the weeks after the hijacking. There were cut-and-paste notes made up of words and letters clipped from newspapers and magazines. Another was handwritten and 2 were typed. All but 1 were signed D.B. Cooper. The other was signed A Rich Man. Number 5. He has become an idol in the modern entertainment industry. The Cooper saga has been sensationalized, and he has become a very widely used character in both television and film. Cooper is more often portrayed as being alive than deceased. In the TV series Prison Break, a character within the prison proves he is the real hijacker by presenting one of the stolen bills. In the film Without a Paddle, the main characters go in search of Cooper and his money in Washington state, and they end up finding his remains alongside $100,000. In 1981, The Pursuit of D.B. Cooper was released, the first feature film depicting the hijacking and its aftermath. Interestingly, in this version of events, Cooper escapes after landing using a jeep he'd hidden in the woods, and he is then later assisted by his estranged wife. Other shows that have fictionalized Cooper include Renegade, Numbers, Lethal Weapon, and Justified. Number 4. His description sounded like James Bond. Part of the sensation surrounding the D.B. Cooper hijacking is due to the fact that he sounded so smooth. The official FBI bulletin that was released described him as a white male, mid-40s, with an olive Latin appearance and a well-spoken, intelligent demeanor. He was wearing a dark suit with a white shirt and black tie. He carried a briefcase and was at times wearing sunglasses. According to one of the key witnesses, stewardess Florence Schaffner, Cooper was calm and even ordered 2 bourbons during the flight. Cooper even paid his bill and wanted to let Schaffner keep the change. He also calmly explained his plans to the pilots. He needed them to follow his instructions so that he could safely jump out of the plane. To completely round out the James Bond appeal, Cooper ended the hijacking by jumping out of the back of the plane with his parachute and the $200,000 in ransom money strapped to him. Number 3. He inspired copycat hijackers. After the apparent success of Cooper's hijacking, many others were inspired to try it in the following year. The most infamous of these copycats was Richard Floyd McCoy Jr., but there were many others who aspired to pull off what Cooper did. One of the most interesting hijackings was committed by a man named Frederick Hanneman, who hijacked a plane taking off from Allentown, Pennsylvania, and demanded it to be grounded at Dulles so that his ransom could be met. His ransom included $303,000, cigarettes, food, parachutes, knives, fuel, and crash helmets. Once his demands were met, Hanneman allowed all the passengers, all but 6 of the flight crew, to leave the plane. He then ordered the plane to take off again. Then he decided the $100 bills he had been given were too small of a denomination, so he ordered the plane to return to Dulles, and 4 hours later they took off again with $500 and $1,000 bills. During the flight, the plane experienced mechanical problems and they had to land at New Orleans. They proceeded to switch planes, Hanneman using his handgun and hostages to shimmy along the runway. They took off again and flew to Honduras, where Hanneman jumped out in the dead of night over the jungle, clutching his ransom. Weeks later, Hanneman later handed himself in to the U.S. Embassy in Honduras. Number 2. He may have had an interview with a local publication. It's a little-known fact that in 1972, the Seattle Flag newspaper published an interview that they claimed was the real man who hijacked the plane. Their proof, you ask? They claimed to have one of the $20 bills supplied to Cooper by the police. They even published an image of the purported bill. The newspaper also claimed they had gone to considerable effort to verify the source. The interview itself is fascinating. The man claims that he opened the rear door of the plane, walked down to the 10th step, and then jumped out into the cold. He claimed he buried his parachute and was a few miles off his intended landing spot. Interestingly, the man declined to answer a question about having an accomplice waiting on the ground. He also claimed the bomb was fake. His suitcase contained Gillette shaving cans painted red with wires rigged into them. He revealed that the riskiest part of the hijacking occurred when the plane was refueling on the ground and authorities were deliberately stalling. And at number 1, the $200,000 he got was a lot in 1971. The $200,000 the skyjacker jumped with on November 24, 1971 is the equivalent of more than $1.3 million in 2022 when inflation is taken into account. The average new car price that year was about $3,500, and gas was selling for 36 cents a gallon. The median home price in Indianapolis was $13,000 in 1971. Otherwise, we beg to end the video, and thanks for watching. Bye.